Underrated and overrated, overachieving and underachieving. What do the stats tell us over the past 10 years? MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down the game we love each and every day for you, the hardcore college football fan, the smart fan. And if you're not a smart fan, stick around, we'll educate you. We're looking back at the decade of the 2010s, 2010 through 19. And this is an interesting topic because the term overrated and underrated is thrown around sports all the time. And we generally have an idea of what we're talking about. Teams and players that are underestimated, maybe not given the publicity or the hyper attention that we believe that they should be. Therefore, they tend to be looked on as underrated versus those name brands that maybe because of tradition or prestige or glamour or where they're located are given too much attention and they fail to meet those expectations on a regular basis. But what are those teams? Who are those teams? I think as a college football person, we generally think of, okay, Notre Dame's overrated. Michigan's typically overrated. Texas has been overrated because they've underachieved based on what we expect them to do and based on their traditions, their name brand, their recognition. And that's reasonable in thinking that. While teams like and programs like Kansas State over the past 20, 25 years under Bill Snyder were typically undervalued, and then they would overachieve. Michigan State at the beginning of the Mark D'Antonio era would overachieve based on the expectations that were generally low. Wisconsin from year to year overachieves because they're a team that doesn't have much glamour, much glitz, and so we underestimate what they can accomplish and then they overachieve. But based on the facts, meaning the estimations and the rankings preseason versus postseason, let's look at the teams that overachieved, meaning that they were underrated when the season started. And probably the best example of this situation during the past decade was the 2013 Auburn Tigers. In their first season under Gus Malzahn, coming off a season in which Gene Chizik finished out his career at Auburn at 3-9, consider a team that went 0-8 in the SEC. That the very next season, of course, was unranked in the preseason, coming off 3-9 and 0-8, and came within 7 seconds of winning the national championship. Consider maybe Rutgers this season coming up, or Georgia Tech, or Vanderbilt, Kansas, or somebody like that, going on to the national championship game this year. Now, Auburn, of course, is laden with talent, and it's not quite the same comparison. But from a record standpoint, from 0-8 in the SEC, unranked in the preseason, Nick Marshall accounted for over 4,000 yards, Trey Mason for almost 2,000 yards rushing, and 24 touchdowns. They go from 3-9 overall to the national championship game, a 21-3 lead against Florida State before they blew it and lost in the last 7 seconds to Jameis Winston in company. And, of course, it took a few miracles, namely the prayer at Jordan Hare against Georgia, a couple tipped passes, and the touchdown to win it in the final minute, and, of course, the infamous kick six to vault Auburn to the SEC championship and the national championship game. The 2013 Auburn Tigers are best example of an underrated team that overachieved by leaps and bounds. Let's stay with the same program and go to the coach that ran that team into the ground, but also won a national championship in Gene Chizik. Just 3 years prior to that, in 2010, the Auburn Tigers started off preseason number 22. They had a young quarterback by the name of Cam Newton. And by week 3 and 4, he turned out to be a superstar who eventually accounted for 50 touchdowns and took that team to a national championship. Coming off 8-5 in 2009, Auburn was ranked number 22 preseason in 2010. And it's pretty rare in college football for a team to go from number 22 in the nation all the way to number 1, win the national championship undefeated with that 22-19 last-second field goal win over Oregon. 2010 Auburn, a team that was underrated and overachieved. Rare circumstances facing the 2012 Ohio State Buckeyes. Of course, Jim Tressel had a successful run, one of the great runs in the history of college football from 2001 through 2010. His final team went 12-1, won the Big Ten Championship, Sugar Bowl win, and finished in the top 5 in the nation. But Tattoo Gate would lead to Tressel's demise. Ohio State plummeted to 7 losses in 2011 under interim coach Luke Fickell. Enter Urban Meyer. I don't know that the pollsters knew what to do with the Buckeyes in 2012, knowing they had talent, but not necessarily elite talent. They lost the 7 games. Urban Meyer would take some time probably to right the ship, but they should have looked at the track record because they ranked the Buckeyes at number 18 preseason. That Ohio State team, of course, could not go to the national championship game or any kind of postseason play. They ripped off 12 consecutive wins, would have won the Big Ten championship, but could not qualify for the Big Ten championship game. So preseason number 18, number 3 behind Alabama as the national champion in 2012 and could not play in the national championship game. Urban Meyer's first team at Ohio State again, 12-0 in 2012. Another overachieving team as we go to Florida and another first-year head coach in Dan Mullen. 4-8 in 2017. Enter Mullen. His Florida team goes 9-3. They win their Peach Bowl game against Michigan in fine fashion. Finished number 8 in the country after entering the season unranked. So from unranked preseason to number 8 in the final poll, Dan Mullen's first year at Florida went 10-3. We've got a couple of TCU teams that were preseason unranked and finished in the top 10 in the nation, both in 2014 and 17. That 2014 team went 12-1, blasted Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl to finish number 3 in the country. They, of course, were part of the controversial decision to be left out of the initial college football playoff in 2014 in favor of Ohio State. Baylor and TCU, with that tied Big 12 title, were both left out of the playoff. And again, TCU finished at 12-1, number 3 in the country after starting the season unranked. 3 years later, TCU again unranked in the preseason poll, finished in the top 10 in the nation after going all the way to the Big 12 championship game and finishing at 11-3. Back to the Big Ten, and the Hawkeyes of Iowa in 2015 went 12-0 in the regular season, came within about a foot of winning the Big Ten championship, but lost to Michigan State at the wire at the goal line. Were buried in the Rose Bowl by Stanford, but still finished in the top 10 in the nation. After finishing the preseason poll unranked, Iowa goes 12-2 and finishes in the top 10. The 2016 Wisconsin Badgers were unranked in the preseason, and they finished in the top 10 in the nation at number 9 after winning the Cotton Bowl and finishing at 11-3 following a Big Ten championship loss to Penn State. What about the plight of Georgia Tech in 2014? They were unranked in the preseason. They went to the ACC championship game, lost to an undefeated Florida State team, went to the Orange Bowl as Florida State would go to the college football playoff. Georgia Tech would, of course, take that ACC number 1 position in the bowl rankings and go to the Orange Bowl, beat Mississippi State of the SEC. This was their only ranked team of the decade at Georgia Tech, and they finished number 8 in the nation, again, after winning the Orange Bowl. That vaulted them to number 16 status in the preseason rankings the next year, and they finished at 3-9. So they may finish on our underachieving list as well. To more underrated teams that overachieved, we go to Penn State in 2016. Consider that Penn State had not finished a season ranked since 2009. So that's 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 6 straight seasons through the Jerry Sandusky scandal that Penn State did not finish ranked. So in the preseason of 2016, following 2 7-6 campaigns under James Franklin, Penn State was again unranked. And they got off to a slow start, losing to Pitt and also getting buried at Michigan 42-10. Penn State stood at 3-2. A few weeks later, they upset number 2 Ohio State and marched off consecutive wins, 7 consecutive wins to win the Big Ten championship over Wisconsin, go to the Rose Bowl, and finish number 7 in the nation in the final poll behind Saquon Barkley and Trace McSorley. Barkley ran for 1,900 yards and 22 touchdowns, and at 11-3 in a Big Ten championship and Rose Bowl appearance, Penn State goes from unranked in the preseason to number 7 in the final poll. Georgia in 2017. The highest ranked team we're going to mention in the preseason, but it's worth noting here that Kirby Smart's first team in 2016 went 8-5. So they finished unranked. So in the preseason of 2017, they were ranked at number 15 in the AP poll. They went all the way through the SEC, won the SEC championship, went to the national championship game after an Oklahoma win in the Rose Bowl, and came that close to winning the national championship. So Georgia goes all the way from number 15 preseason to number 2 in the final poll after losing the national championship game. In 2015, Stanford, behind Christian McCaffrey, they went from preseason number 21 all the way to number 3, though they did not make the college football playoff. They won the Pac-12. They won the Rose Bowl in resounding fashion over Iowa, and they finished number 3 in the country. Go back to 2010, Andrew Luck's Stanford team went from unranked in the preseason all the way to a final ranking of number 4 after they won the Orange Bowl over Virginia Tech. Michigan State and Mark D'Antonio in 2013. They were preseason unranked. They went 13-1, beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, won the Rose Bowl over Stanford, finished number 3 in the nation after starting the season unranked. Then in 2014, Mississippi State found themselves atop of the college football playoff rankings, the very first rankings ever released by the selection committee, number 1. Though they lost 3 games in the Orange Bowl, Mississippi State started the season at unranked and finished at number 11. And again, worth noting that they were the number 1 team in the very initial first college football playoff rankings. Missouri in 2013, in just their second season in the SEC, won the SEC Eastern Division, finished second in the ACC, SEC, won the Cotton Bowl, and finished number 5 in the nation under Gary Pinkel after starting the season unranked. Another unranked team from the SEC in the preseason in 2012 was Texas A&M. But they started a very, at that point, unknown quarterback by the name of Johnny Manziel, who took the college football nation by storm, won the Heisman Trophy, beat Alabama, won the Cotton Bowl to finish 11-2, and number 6 in the country after starting the season unranked. Michigan twice started the season unranked and finished number 12 in the nation. Not a great feat, but still worth noting here. In 2011, Michigan under Brady Hoke won the Sugar Bowl over Virginia Tech, finished 11-2, number 12 in the country. And in 2015, Jim Harbaugh's inaugural season at Michigan, they went 10-3 after annihilating Florida in the Citrus Bowl 41-7. So both those squads finished at number 12 in the nation after starting the season preseason unranked. UCF, both of their historic teams that finished in the top 10 in the nation, started the season unranked. Blake Bortles and company finished number 10 and won the Cotton Bowl in 2013. And then, of course, the historic run to win the Peach Bowl, beat Auburn, and finish 13-0. That team was in the final AP poll at number 6 with Mackenzie Milton at quarterback, and they were unranked to start the season. So UCF has done it twice, starting the season unranked and then finishing in the top 10 both in 2013 and 2017. The Notre Dame team with Manti Te'o that went all the way to the BCS National Championship game in 2012, started the season unranked. So they went unranked, won 12 consecutive games to vault to number 1 in the nation, was blasted by Alabama, but still finished in the top 4 in the nation. And actually, Notre Dame's team 4 years later that won the Citrus Bowl over LSU and finished number 11 in the country, that team was unranked to start the season. Baylor, 3 times, began the season unranked and finished number 13 in the final poll. And both of these, all 3 of these seasons were quite notable for different reasons. In 2011, of course, Baylor produced its only Heisman Trophy in the history of the school. RG3 won the Heisman, and Baylor finished number 13. In 2013, they went to the Cotton Bowl. They went to the Fiesta Bowl and lost to UCF, the team we just mentioned. And that Baylor team was led by Bryce Petty. And then, of course, just this past season, after going 1-11, then 7-6 under Matt Rule, Baylor finished 11-3 after an 11-1 regular season, went to the Big 12 championship game for the first time in school history, lost the Sugar Bowl, but still finished number 13 in the nation after starting the season unranked. So Baylor 3 times started the season unranked and finished at number 13 in this past decade. More Group of 5 love given to Houston in 2015. That team won the American Conference at 13-1 and blasted Florida State and Dalvin Cook in the Peach Bowl to finish number 8 in the country. Greg Ward scored 38 touchdowns that season. That Houston squad was unranked in the preseason and again finished at number 8 in the country. How about Washington State and Luke Falk in 2018? 11-2 with the best record in the Pac-12, finished number 10 in the nation, and that team started off unranked in the preseason. All in all, there were 17 teams in the decade between 2010 and 2019. 17 teams were unranked in the preseason, finished in the top 10 in the nation. That's almost 2 teams per season that were unranked in the preseason that finished in the top 10. So consider, every time you look at a top 10 during that entire decade, 2 of those teams were unranked in the preseason. The Group of 5, definitely undervalued, as preseason pollsters are constantly looking for those Power 5 teams that are going to finish in the top 25. Think about this. The Group of 5 were only ranked 10 times in the preseason in 10 years. That's 1 per season. Twice that was Boise State being ranked in the top 10 in the nation, but only 10 times were Group of 5 teams ranked in the preseason top 25. But how many do you think were ranked in the postseason top 25? 10 in the preseason top 25. 39 Group of 5 teams were ranked in the postseason top 25. 5 of those teams ranked in the top 10, led by Boise State twice, UCF twice, and Houston the one time that we just mentioned. And again, Boise State was ranked out of those 39 teams. Boise State led the pack, being ranked 7 times in the postseason AP Top 25. Our look at the teams that were undervalued, underrated, but overachieved in the decade of 2010 through 19 right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Let me know if you'd like to share some of your perspective on some of these teams and maybe some that we missed. But I evaluated all the top 25 preseason rankings and postseason rankings from 2010 through 19. Now it's your turn right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Please follow me on Twitter, and we will talk some college football there as well.